So our track construction panel, I do things a little bit different here, guys. So I let you introduce yourselves. So Brian, one of the wizards of pavement, please tell folks a little bit about you.
Well, good morning. My name is Brian Prowel. I'm an asphalt geek, I guess is the best way to put it. We do a lot of work in various forms of asphalt pavement, from pavement design up through development of specifications, testing asphalt, research and construction of pavements. About 40% of our business is racetrack pavements. A lot of it is building new tracks or overlaying or rehabilitating existing tracks. We'll also work on evaluating emergency repair products, things like that. We've been working on tracks. The first track we worked on was Homestead, Miami in 2003, and have worked on over 20 tracks since that time.
And Bob, you fixed up some of my favorite NASCAR tracks. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Bob Harrington. As you can see, I'm the oldest guy on the panel. I go way back in racing. I started out as an asphalt paver in Michigan. I've worked for a company that paved Michigan Speedway 2 times for Roger Penske, and was involved in the tire war in '94, resulting in the specification that is used now. The good doctor has refined it considerably. I work with Brian Prowel on the racetracks. Many of them we've done together. I met him in, as he said, in Homestead, and since then we've done most of the ISC tracks. That's essentially me.
One of the great things about RTBC is we bring together folks from different aspects of the racing industry to talk on the same panel, because we got a sports marketing guy from Andrett, sports marketing. But Tim, you have a lot of difficulties, especially when it's moving to a new venue or setting up a temporary course, that you need help in this arena.
Absolutely, and I hire guys like this panel right here to help us out. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Ramsberger, Vice President of Andrett Sports Marketing. I'm a recovering lawyer who detoured into sports, into racing about 12 years ago and couldn't seem to find my way out. So I served the past 10 years as the president of the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, formerly the Honda Grand Prix of St. Petersburg, and we also organized the Toronto race as well. In my new position here with Andrett Sports Marketing, I'm the general manager of the new race in Louisiana, the Indy Grand Prix of Louisiana in New Orleans. So we're very excited about that. That's April 10th through the 12th. Very exciting location, very fun town, as most of you probably know. So it's going to be a great setting for the IndyCar race there in the spring. In Andrett Sports Marketing, we do a variety of things in and out of motorsports, stick and ball sports as well. We're the promoter for New Orleans, as I mentioned. We're also the promoter for Milwaukee. And we're also the promoter for Formula E down in Miami this March. We just completed a season with Global Rallycross as well. So we've got a group of people that work on a variety of tracks and a variety of temporary setups. So thanks for having me.
And finally, Chris, you guys are the experts at setting up barriers or making the barriers that a lot of kart tracks use. But as we were talking a couple weeks ago, a lot of your barriers can be used for other reasons at the racetrack as well. And I understand you also have some new products you're going to have on display here at PRI.
That's correct. My name is Chris Scribner. As you can see, I'm the youngest guy up here on this panel.
Hey, wait a minute. Time out. I got my ID on me.
And I'm considered the plastics geek. But Scribner Plastics, we began making plastic manufactured parts for a lot of high-impact usage, the 5-gallon utility jugs that most racers are familiar with, and as well as transmission and engine shipping containers that move across the country. Getting into the barrier market and creating an energy absorption barrier was kind of in the line of things because we already made plastic to absorb the impact and protect engines and whatever the contents may be in the utility jugs, but the track barriers, they were kind of right up our alley. We started out making the barriers for temporary courses for go-kart tracks and indoor go-kart tracks, and we decided to expand our line of barriers and be able to go double and triple high and create a pretty good unit to absorb the impact. Safety of the driver and the race car obviously is the most important. So what we manufacture is a energy absorption unit to absorb the impact, not necessarily contain the race car, but definitely it's the first line of defense before they get to a solid concrete wall. So that's our product.
This is going to be a very geeky segment here because, of course, in my previous life, before I got into the radio business, my degree is in agricultural meteorology, which for some people, they say, what is that all about? I've had people think, is that telling the weather by feeling the cow's udders? But it's really not. But so I'm going to let my geekiness be indulged a little bit here, Brian. How tough is it to come up with a right compound for a racetrack, and what are some of the variables that you guys have to look at? Weather, type of racing, what are some of the variables that you have to look at when you're finding that right mix?
The right mix. Well, I will say Bob, and as Bob mentioned, Bob kind of initially developed the spec for the right mix, and I think that's the hardest part for some people to understand is the right mix that is the right mix for like a NASCAR facility or a really high-end road course like NOLA Motors Sports Park is the same as the course you need for a smaller track, because at least in a lot of cases, when you get cars out there with very sticky tires, particularly if you're running club events with a lot of cars on the track, and that's part of the formula. If you're running one car, you can maybe do some things and get away with a lesser compound, but as you put more cars on there, you tend to heat up the pavement. So it's not just whatever solar radiation's warming up that pavement, but also then those hot tires from those cars. Really what the right compound is, it's kind of size of aggregate. You don't want too big an aggregate that'll pick out, start pulling out stones. You need the right binder, the right liquid asphalt to hold it all together. You need the right amount of liquid asphalt. Too little and it'll dry up and kind of blow away after a period of time, if you will. So it's kind of getting all those, and then you need to construct it well. It's laying it uniformly so the texture is uniform, which leads to uniform friction and grip for the racers. But it also, if you kind of, we call it segregation, but if you're not careful in the way you lay it and the way you compact it, it's not going to last nearly as long as what you'd like or perform the way you want it.
And Bob, how much has that mix changed over the years?
Well, I want to just say, elaborate a little on what Brian has said. And what typically happens is a lot of tracks will hire the local paver that can do state highway work, and that's impressive. But state highway designs are totally different than racetrack designs. We use the same specifications for aggregates and asphalt cements and things, but the loading is totally different. On a state highway, they're designing for trucks in easels, meaning the loads a truck, which are straight down. Okay, a racetrack, as you well know, as you enter a turn, everything turns to be a lateral force off to the side. Everything is being loaded on a road course, not on a road course, an oval, on the right front tire. So all your weight is on that right front tire. It's pushing this way. So there's a tremendous difference in what you're looking at from a state highway to a road course or an oval. So now the question was...
How has that changed?
Okay.
How much has that changed?
Well, how's it changed? When I first started, it was all state highway work, including me. I paved the first time Michigan Speedway with a state highway conventional mix, and it lasted real well. But in '94, everything changed. Hoosier and Goodyear entered into a tire war. And as you probably recall, they ripped up a lot of tracks. So we entered into a design-build contract with Roger Penske to come up with a new mix. And that's the mix that Brian's talking about that has different parameters in it. It's now used throughout the United States. We also did it up in Montreal, and it's been done in England. So it's totally changed from the good old days.
And Tim, from the race promotion standpoint with you guys, you can have a lot of headaches if the other two gentlemen don't do their work right, and you guys got to be ready for almost everything to happen.
You do, and I'll probably state the obvious here, but you'll be surprised how many times you go to a temporary setup and you miss the obvious. What I like to talk about is the 5 C's that we operate under on a temporary setup. First is your contractor, and contractors. If you've got a contractor that you know and trust, that can obviously be a great start to your endeavor to build a temporary facility. The second would be coordination, and I'm assuming here that you obviously have a validly licensed course layout and a valid license with a municipality or wherever you're racing. So those two assumptions are in play. The second thing is your coordination. Coordinating with not only with the entity that you have a license agreement with, but all those that you're going to impact. And in a temporary street race, obviously you've got business interruption, you've got all sorts of coordination, whether it be train tracks, highways, openings at night, things of that nature. You'd be surprised how that type of coordination is lacking at times. The third thing that ties directly into that is communication. We try to, in every temporary setup in cities that we go into, is obviously have a written plan in place that we communicate it, we distribute it, we get feedback on it, so there's no questions. Having a meeting with no notes coming out of it is one thing. People get confused and they hear one thing and understand a different thing. So communication would be the third one. And then obviously you need to have a contingency plan, because it won't go as planned in most of the times. And so contingency is key, especially when you're dealing with a situation where you've got a very short schedule, you've got an absolute readiness on a certain day, and you've got weather that comes into play. So your contingency plans are key there. Then the last thing is coverage. And it's not only coverage in the sense of making sure you've got proper insurance coverage, you do need that, but coverage in the sense that you've got not only your inspections completed, but you're partnered with your underwriter to make sure they've inspected all those areas on track, off track, to make sure that they sign off before you go hot. So those are basically the 5 C's that we operate under.
And Chris, with your company, just like the two gentlemen with the construction mix, the different pavement mix, there's always new technology that's out there. There's also new products that you're always bringing online. How do you guys keep up with what's new in plastics and softer rubbers?
Well, a couple of new products that we're debuting here at the show this weekend is the ability to go triple high with our barriers to get 54 inches tall. And it's exactly that. It's triple high. We stack our barriers 3 high. And that allows a little bit more containment for elevation. You get a couple cars on top of each other in the IndyCar series. That sometimes does happen. And it helps them keep contained. But another product we're debuting here at the show it's called a Soft Link. It's a rubberized barrier. In the past, we've had a medium duty and a heavy duty. And the medium duty is just our standard barrier that we sell to most all tracks. And the heavy duty would be for heavy impact points, real thick plastic. Really takes a pretty strong blow. But the newest one is it's a kind of a rubberized barrier. It's a pretty soft barrier. You guys can come by our booth. It's booth number 525 and see how soft it is. But it really has the ability to absorb heavy impacts in a really soft manner. And just like the asphalt and the tires ripping up the asphalt, when that tire gives way, something's gotta hold it and something's gotta absorb it before it's a solid Armco barrier or a K-rail. And that's where our barrier comes in, and it allows to really absorb the heavy impact and keep the damage, and keep whether it's the damage of the equipment or the driver itself. It really keeps it as minimal as possible. And that as we all know with the insurance companies, that's pretty important to make sure that the driver gets out and walks away.
Yeah, I was going to tie in a situation we had in St. Pete for several years. We run on an airport runway. And when it comes to, putting down temporary asphalt in certain turns, in turn 1 there, we had problems for years with that coming up. And it's not just a simple come in and fix it for the race. You've got to deal with the FAA on a long-term basis. You've got to deal with the city that owns the airport itself. So those types of things can be very complicated very quickly because of the different situations you have. And in our case, with the runway in St. Petersburg, the FAA had to step in and really kind of curtail what we were able to do there. So unfortunately, we had a surface situation in turn one there. When we had ALMS back in 07, 08, they really tore up turn one there.
If I could say something about it, I couldn't agree more than one of your C's, which is the contingencies. We all think that nothing's going to happen to us, and yet things happen. I was involved in two things happen. The Daytona Speedway one, where a car hit the dryer, and the Belle Isle, where the pavement came up. So what's extremely important is that you plan ahead. You have the materials, you have them on a trailer. That trailer is available inside the oval, if it's an oval, or if it's a road course, somewhere where it can immediately get out on the track. It isn't back in the shop. You have trained personnel that understand what to do. You've designated one or two people to look at the problem, decide on the fix, then have your staff come up and fix it. It's extremely important if you're going to have a smooth running show, and he can attest to that. Brian?
And I was going to say, there are repair materials that are available that you can use under race situations that cure very quickly and will hold up so you can continue on a race. You know, there's nothing media likes better than watching us pavement geeks out there pointing at a problem on the asphalt and saying, you know, scratching our heads and going, what can we do? But there are materials, and International Speedway Corporation keeps them at their tracks. Other people we've worked with, you know, we kind of recommend that we'll work from surface raveling through if you'd have something that would create a relatively major hole in the track. The other thing that I think is interesting with the existing facilities is some of you may go, well, if you can race on city streets and they use highway asphalt, why can't we use that on our track? And I think some of the issue is you got to understand with asphalt is it changes with time. It ages. And there's some people will call and they'll go, well, what's the cure time? And you might go, well, you know, concrete cures. Asphalt, we don't typically think of curing, but it does age. It loses some of the oils that are in it, and it gets stiffer with time. So if you have city streets that have sat out there for, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, that asphalt is much stiffer, and it's actually approaching the stiffness of what we design in our new racetrack asphalt. But it's gotten there by time. The thing is, you don't want to build a track and wait for 5, 6 years to use it. That's not a really good economical model. And it's that balance. And even on your track and building it, you know, in straightaways, you could probably use more of a highway mix potentially. It's those turns that become the problem.
One other thing is Brian hit on building the track. If it's a high-banked oval like Talladega or something, a lot of the force is directly going into the track. So you have a high-bank track, very difficult to build, but very easy to really keep together, or easier to keep together. You have a, let's say, easier. Right, okay. But then you have a road course, easy to pave, or relatively easy to pave, very difficult to keep together because of tight turns, the tremendous forces to the lateral forces, very shallow banking. So you got the two issues: one easier to pave and harder to keep together; one hard to pave and easier to keep together.
How much product making emergency repairs is big, important time. You got to save the show. You know, how much product needs to be kept on location to do an emergency repair? Is there a rule of thumb on that?
It depends.
Yeah. Let's say Belle Isle. Here, let's talk Belle Isle. Are people familiar with it, or should I give you a quick? He's real familiar with it. Real quick, Belle Isle is a city of Detroit. It's an island right downtown. It has an old road course on it. As you well know, Detroit's had some financial problems, and so the pavement was in pretty bad shape. We had put on, it had a lot, it was concrete in many areas and asphalt in other areas, and we had put a crack filler in to fix some of the cracks. We had successful 3 days of racing. The last day, of course, is the Indy cars, and we had heavy rains. The concrete was very poor, and the rains got in there, and it loosened up the crack filling material, which was not the conventional crack filling, but it was a wide crack fill. It was about 6 inches wide. The Indy cars have a tremendous amount of ground force and vacuum underneath them, and they just literally lifted it up. But we had planned ahead. We had a whole pallet of set 45 on hand. We had the guys ready to go. It was very embarrassing to Mr. Penske, but we did fix the track, and we did complete the race. So I think to answer your question, how much material, if it's a new track, you can have less. If it's an old track, you better have lots of material. We had worked with the supplier of the set 45. If we did not use it, we could return it and just have a restocking charge. So Daytona was the other one I was involved in. They had a total, they had a whole trailer full of the equipment, the trained personnel, and lots of material, and we used lots of material. So it's a tough call.
You know, I think I'm looking at the folks from Palmer that I was talking to earlier this morning. So you have a new track, and I would encourage you to look into having some of these products on hand, because you know, you hope that your track is built well and it's gonna perform well. But there's certainly the chance, you know, even on jobs that Bob and I are both working on, and we're following the paver day in and day out, testing behind it. I mean, there's the chance that there's an area that was missed, or where, you know, something happened that we knew about and we didn't fix at the time for whatever reason. So having some material on hand, even on a new track, is important. Daytona had so much material because they had just resurfaced and were an old track that had a lot of problems. So they were, you know, after the pothole issue, they were prepared for that. But otherwise, they probably would not have had that much problem. Some of the products, Bob mentioned Set 45, which is a quick curing concrete. That's an older product that a lot of you might be familiar with. You can fill holes with it. You can kind of brush it into the surface. There's a newer product that we use a lot called Track Bond, which is a coating that helps stop the raveling or loss of material from the surface of the track. And then there's some epoxies and some polyester resins. PCP 2000 is the resin that will work on fairly large areas and shallow depths, or Fast Track 500 will fill small holes. So, you know, there's a range of products that are quick setting that you can use, you know, in race conditions to fill a variety of holes. Now, one bad thing is most of them have a shelf life. So, you know, you do got to be, and they're not cheap, so you got to be careful how much you buy and keep on hand, because, you know, if they sit around for a year or so and you don't use them, you're going to have to throw them away and buy new ones.
And Chris, I've seen your barriers take a heck of a licking and keep on ticking, but how much extra should folks have just in case?
You know, that's an interesting question. For the most part, you know, none of our customers have had to have too much extra. You know, the thing about the barriers is you have your impact zone, and you have your zones where, you know, the inside of the turn where the cars are going to, you know, hit the apex and tap them every once in a while. You have your exits, and then you have a lot of the just the directional barriers, the ones that are straight down the straightaway. You know, I haven't actually run into that, to be completely honest with you. I mean, for the most part, we've been fortunate enough that our products have held together rather well. You know,
I've seen racers try to challenge that, by the way.
Absolutely, you know, absolutely. You know, and I think that that's where the new product of the rubber barrier comes in. You know, a lot of tracks, they've asked for that, just to have a really, really soft wall at the end of a long straightaway. You know, brakes go out, throttle sticks, whatever it may be. That's where the rubberized barrier comes in. But you know, for the most part, you know, we've been very fortunate. Our products have held up well. But you know, just like the contingencies, you should always have, you know, some extra on hand, whether it's you know, barriers or, you know, some patch for the asphalt. But you know, that's a tough question to answer. I'd have to ask some of our customers.
Are there any questions out here that you have for our track construction experts? And see, this is when I get my exercise. As you can see, I've been eating too much good food at the tracks lately, so I need all the exercise I can get.
I just have a simple question. Is there a formula you use for the progressive banking of a racetrack to create multiple grooves on the, and certainly that'll depend on the size. I'd be looking at a 3rd mile oval racetrack. Is there a, like I said, a degree of progression that you look at in so many feet?
You guys don't want me to take this question, so go ahead.
Well, that's once again a tough question to answer. Really, both Brian and I are on the construction side. We do a lot of work for International Speedway Corporation, and they have in-house engineers, and then they hire consultants and engineers, and they're the ones that really figure that out. We're the guys that have to pave it, and so from our standpoint, it depends on what kind of paver that you're going to use as to what progressive banking you can do. If you're going to use a fixed screed, meaning the actual asphalt paver that cannot get larger and smaller on the run, then you got to really figure out your lanes or you're going to get trapped because typically the turn, because it's banked, is wider because the hypotenuse than the straights. And if you figure out the paving lanes in the turn and use a fixed paver, it's not going to work when you come down on the straights. It's not, the straights aren't wide enough. But the formula to figure out that is a tough call. It depends on what kind of car, what kind of aggregates. There's a lot of issues. Ryan?
I was going to say there's a couple of constructability aspects. We've seen typically on like a 1 degree change in 20 feet is typical for some of the tracks that we've worked on, and that's not our work. That's just kind of what we've worked on. Some of the factors that come into play is it creates a hinge point. There are screeds that can pave a parabola, a true smooth curve. They're pretty rare. There's one in Japan. I'm not sure you want to bring that to your track. So it's, typically we do them in flat segments, and a degree change between that creates a hinge point, which is somewhat hard for us to construct. The rollers have to roll right up to that hinge, and they don't want to really cross over. That creates problems, because they'll actually ride up and bridge, and they won't compact an area if they're coming up onto that hinge point. And then, we've had on things that, again, we didn't design, but we're witnessing there when, drivers have crossed hinge points. If they're too severe, they complain about them because it'll throw their car. So it's relatively small. Another consideration is then your wall heights, because as you start to change banking, you can change elevation pretty quickly. We were talking about a track recently, and it's something like 10 inches per degree or something like that. So you got to kind of plan out ahead of time.
Is this an existing track that you're planning on repaving? Well, as Brian said, then you really got to consider your outside crash wall because it radically changes the height of that wall with the degrees that you go up.
Could you describe the aging of asphalt and what it's telling us as it ages and what we should look for and maybe what we should do if we could see what we were supposed to see?
Okay, so asphalt does get stiffer as it ages. That's a good thing from a raveling. So raveling is what we call the loss of aggregate from the surface of the track, and which happens typically in the turns. It'll happen everywhere. It happens on every pavement, but when it happens quickly, that's a problem. You're going to lose some. Your texture is going to change with time. It's going to get greater no matter what you make the track out of. As far as what to watch for, so that's good. The stiffening's good from that standpoint, but what it'll lead to in time is cracking. Cracking is bad for a couple reasons, obviously. It can create bumps in time. It lets water into the pavement, which is probably the biggest deal, not so much to your racers, but to your long-term performance. So you're going to want to seal those cracks in times. Sometimes you see on the highways, there'll be these squiggly smears of sealant going down the road. That's not what you want to do. Typically on a racetrack, they can use a router that'll create a channel in the crack, and that creates a confined groove for the material so it's not really globbed up on the surface where a tire can pick it up. You've got to spec the right material. If you don't get a stiff enough product and the local person may not use that, it'll again pull out from cars. So you got to watch them out. If these cracks start to interconnect, Bob mentioned the downforce and the suction that are created under some of the Indy cars and things like that. They'll actually pull chunks out of the pavement. Those can become projectiles that hit cars behind, which can make for some very unhappy drivers. And then you might need some of that hole filler, rapid set epoxy stuff we talked about. I think one of the things that, and it was actually kind of a feed question I had given, was you need to look at your track. We've been to a lot of tracks where the grass is nicely mowed and the rose bushes are trimmed, and then you go out and there's all kinds of oil spills on the track and things like that. You get an oil spill, gas spill, you need to clean that up. We like Tide, kitty litter kind of works. Diatomaceous earth works pretty well. Get that stuff off. It'll soften the asphalt, and it'll actually, if it's like gasoline or fuel, it'll eat away the asphalt. So you need to clean that up as quickly as possible. It's really just keeping an eye on the track, and as you see things, be proactive in fixing them rather than reactive on, when these gentlemen bring an event to your track and, lots of people are watching and then, oh, I've got a problem. You should figure that out ahead of time and take care of it.
I agree. A lot of tracks are quite old. And like Daytona, hadn't been paved in a long time. And it was
28 years.
28 years, okay. And it was in great shape because they did a lot of maintenance. They were concerned about their track. They did the crack filling, etc. It just became old and it ended up with that pothole. But they got good life out of that track. A lot of tracks are like that because they walk the track. They do that crack filling. They do the things that Brian talks about. It's a lot of just housekeeping. That'll prevent you from getting blisters if you keep water out from the pavement. It also will reduce the chances of delamination, meaning the layers being unhooked from each other. And perhaps there's some older people in here that remember Michigan Speedway on race weekend, NASCAR race, sold out. Saturday night, they were blowing the track, and they blew out a big section of Turn 3 because it was delaminated. And of course, it had to be fixed because the race was the next day. But pavement designed well, drainage system, housekeeping, it will last a long time.
Is the new Air Titan, is that easier on tracks than the old jet dryers, or has there just not been enough data yet?
Well, yes to both questions. It's easier on the track. It's because it's cool air. It's not hot air. It has very low pressure, especially the Titans that are out there now. But there's not a whole bunch of data out there. But from our initial investigation and Brian looking at it and things, it's good. It's real good.
How often should a track promoter sort of do a what's up with my pavement thing? Is that before every show, after every show? What would be a good sort of preventative maintenance schedule?
If you're like a private track that's operating daily, I'd say once a week at least. You want to get in a golf cart. A car it's hard to see, but a golf cart seems to be a good tool to us that you can get around there quickly enough. I like to walk actually, but walking would be better. But a golf cart will work and drive around. You're fairly close to the pavement. You can see it, and you can spot issues. If you're a facility like Daytona that maybe isn't as used as frequency, then what you'd like to do is a month before the event, before people start coming in, then do a detailed inspection, so you have time to address any problems you find before people start showing up and bringing in equipment and testing and all that kind of stuff.
Hi, I'm Fred Ferguson with Palmer Motorsports. We just got done paving our track, and we looked at the mixes that were used at a lot of other tracks, but ended up basically using local materials. The aggregate was sourced locally, and we looked at what Lime Rock had used and has held up well. I'm just curious, you seem to say that you're using the same kind of mix with the binder and top coat on all the ISC tracks. Are you using some, can you speak to what you're doing up at Watkins Glen this coming year in terms of the repave there, and what life expectancy you're looking to get?
Well, okay, when we say the same, I guess I gotta characterize that a little bit. So one of the things you have in a mixture is the range of particle sizes of the aggregates. We tend to use either a 1/2 inch mix or a 3/8 inch. We prefer the 3/8 inch mix, and that's because it seems to last longer and it has less chance of cars picking out particles. Some people don't like that though, because one of your concerns, it really depends if you race wet and dry or just dry. NASCAR races dry, so it's no problem for NASCAR tracks. But if you're going to race both, a 1/2 inch mix will give you a little more texture, a little space for water to go under the tire, so it can be a little grippier in wet weather, which some people prefer. We'll normally give the owner, some choices. We'll describe, okay, you can do this or this. These are the pros of this, cons of that. So we have a kind of a range of particle sizes in from a 1/2 inch down and 3/8 inch down, and we try and stay in that band where we've had good success. You design asphalt mixtures by volumes of aggregate and air and asphalt. You want to have some airspace so when it gets hot in the summer, the asphalt doesn't bleed up to the surface. But you don't want to have too much airspace or it lets water in and it gets old faster. It overly ages. The binder we use is fairly similar. You might say, well, so for instance, we worked on the track in Montreal, the F1 track that had come apart, and finally got it situated a few years back. Wood to knock on, but hopefully it'll stay situated. It is. But you'd say, okay, well, Montreal's cold. We don't need as high, but we use the same high temperature stiffness of the binder there as we would use in Florida. Now, when we built a track out in Palm Springs, we used even a stiffer. So we got to adjust for climate, and then low temperature becomes important. We can adjust. The binder needs to resist low temperature cracking, basically thermal changes. Things you don't think too much about racing. So it's binder right for the climate, the right amount of binder with these volumetric properties, and then a range of gradation sizes that we use similarly. As far as the aggregates, so those do vary. We have imported aggregates to some tracks. That's very expensive. We try and use local aggregates that are hard. I don't know exactly what aggregate you use, but Massachusetts, generally speaking, has good quality aggregates.
Dennis, could I get back to the temporary road course?
Yes, please.
I think it's probably the toughest one to get ready because it's city streets. And as we all know, city streets vary within the city and within a block. There are maintenance programs, etc. So it's very important that you really spend some time walking them. You have to walk them, and you have to walk them slow. You got to look at the manholes. Is it going to be a race that's going to suck up the covers? So do they need to be welded down? You got to look for cold patch, which is a temporary repair product. It may be when you're walking, it may be nice and hard, but now it's race weekend, it's hot, and there's rules of racing. It's always the hottest day of the century when you race, and then it rains. Is that right?
Yeah, and you don't always have a lot of time to react, especially if you haven't done your inspections through the year. In St. Petersburg, there were plenty of times in the off season where I would drive around town, and you'd be amazed what the city has done to your track and not told you about it. They've put patches in, or they've put curbing in certain locations, and you come in, and so then you have to deal with getting your different sanctioning bodies there to come take a look at it, because obviously we have to comply with the requirements of the sanctioning body for racing purposes.
I was out at Long Beach one time, And it's all the barriers up. They're putting the tents. They're putting everything up. The haulers are showing up, and so is the gas company. And they're going to dig up the track. So it's a tough one. So you really got to be on top of it. You got to have guys that know what to do, and you really got to spend some time. You can't just get in that old Chevy and drive around a couple times.
I hope one of you guys are texting McCallion right now, letting him know, or to knock out there.
And Tim, it's really tough in your business because not only do you need a good track that'll race great and put on a great show, but you have to think about fan safety as well. How much of that, how tough is that in today's world?
It is a number one priority. It's a baseline premise, and all that we do is obviously safety for everybody, the drivers, the fans. We've talked a lot about the surfaces, but the walls and the catch fence are something that obviously, we've had some experiences in IndyCar, Houston 2 years ago. It can happen in a flash. And this is going to be a little bit of a shameless plug here, but we've got Ray Smith in the room here. Ray is our contractor for St. Pete. He's also doing work for us in NOLA. He's a fence expert, does tracks all around the country. You've got to, when I talked about the coordination piece earlier and the contractor piece, you have got to sit and spend considerable time talking through all those, not only the setup contingency, but the contingency of, okay, what happens when the crash hits? Are we prepared? Because you can't just shut your track down and tell people to go home for a couple of days and then come back. So that contingency plan with your contractor on the safety barrier system it's probably the one thing that I will say, with all due respect, the racing surface in a lot of situations is what it is in a temporary setup, but your safety system is one of those things that you constantly focus on.
And Chris, while your product is very tough, you're also looking at a weather-sensitive thing. What temperature extremes should you avoid storing the product in between uses?
For the most part, polyethylene, if it's cold, and it's 10 degrees outside or 0 degrees, it's just like anything, it's going to be a little more brittle. But for the most part, if you're storing it, at 10 degrees throughout the off season, and you get back to race time and it's 7 degrees outside, it's going to hold up just like it did, when it was new. If and polyethylene, the materials is a lot like anything, a lot like asphalt. It does weather. If you have a barrier system that you've had for 10 years and it's been 0 degrees every winter, and you're bringing it out and you're putting it in the hot sun and it's 100 degrees, through time, of course, the UV rays, it is gonna take away the product. It is something that you should, get new stuff every once in a while, just like anything. But for the most part, when it comes to storing it and then using it the next year, it's gonna be just like it was the year before.
Okay, pavement geeks, I've got a question that I've always wanted to ask, because when I first went down for my first race down at Darlington, this ages it a few years. I've been covering this sport for over 15 years. You could literally wear out a pair of shoes heading down pit lane. Now, the new pavement that they have seems to be a little more generic to tracks all over the country. Is that the trend now of using, a set mix that's pretty standard, whether you're running north or south, or how has that changed?
Well, I worked on Darlington when it was in that cheese grater stage, and actually crawled around pouring asphalt into cracks trying to keep it together. At the end, there was an area coming out of turn 2 there that was problematic. So we try and design tracks to be durable, because as an owner, you don't want to necessarily repave every 5 years, right? You'd like to get that 28-year Daytona span, or the 29.5-year Talladega span. So how do you do that? And so we've tried to come up with a mix that'll be durable in time. Does that lead to a bit of generic? Well, there have been some pushback on that, and some of it is, if we make the mix where we put enough asphalt in and use the right binder, then it doesn't ravel as quickly. Like I said, all mixes will lose some of the fines, and that's what had happened at Darlington. It had lost all the fines, and so you had nubs of coarse aggregate that were sticking up, And those had kind of rounded over, they'd worn, so you had these little round, dots all over the place that would tear up a tire that were sticking proud to the pavement. So we try and slow that process down. It'll happen eventually. It's just we're trying to delay it. And so that does, I mean, I don't know if generic's the right word, but it leads to that sameness, and some people truly don't like that.
Is that easier, though, for the tire manufacturers and the competitors?
Well, I wanted to mention that. I too worked in Darlington, and long time at Darlington, as a matter of fact. And if it snows in Darlington or frost, there's nobody with an ice scraper, and so there's no way to scrape your ice unless you use your credit card. Anyway, for a long time, Goodyear and the other tire manufacturers had to have a big range of tires because of the difference in the aggregates and the surfaces. Because there has been some standardization, and there isn't that much standardization because we're still using the local aggregates, which are different, of course, all over America. But there are some standardizations, and there's some things that are unique to a particular track. But with that said, the tire manufacturers have been able to reduce the amount of different tires that they, of softness to hardness, etc., that they've had to provide. And so that's been on a positive side.
On the negative side, because some of these tracks have a lower texture initially, then the wear of the tire they actually want a certain degree of wear, and they don't necessarily get that. So if it's a private facility and you've got people that are buying their own tires, they kind of like some of these mixes a lot. They think this is great. They can run, lap after lap, have a lot of fun and not wear out their tires. But for the Goodyear folks, they don't necessarily appreciate that after a while because it can cause overheating of the tire and blistering. So it is a balance, like everything.
How much preparation did you guys have to do figuring out what needed to be changed, if anything, at that track, or how much goes into determining whether a track is viable for the series?
Yeah, the track actually has just completed its renovation to meet the IndyCar specifications. It's a 2.7-mile track. It's going to be very fast for these Indy cars. One of the challenges in where it's located, Louisiana, as some of you may know, is it's in a bayou. And so the subsurface is really the biggest challenge that they have down there. And luckily, the owner of the facility is a chemical engineer by trade, and so he's intimately involved with the design of the track and the subsurface design and the surface itself. So they've been working on this for quite a long time, and they're working hard to finish it off. We just got our FIA inspection approval last month, so we're very excited about that, a level 2. So we're going to go racing in April there.
Well, it is time for us to wrap this panel up. So since we started at the far end for the opening statements, we'll start right here with Chris with your closing statement.
Well, as far as track barriers and safety, of course I sell barriers, but overkill is always the best way to go. There's a lot of impact zones out there, and a lot of these cars are carrying a lot of speed. They're carrying a lot of speed, especially at NOLA. They're going to be cooking there, and you get a couple cars together and they touch tires, and the control is out the window, and they're just they're going until they hit something, right? And so we tell everybody, they always ask us how many barriers do we think they should have, and I said, well, we think you should have this, and you should probably times what we say by 2, because when the cars are carrying that amount of speed, and you've seen it all the tracks at Talladega and Darlington, and you've seen the safer barriers out there. You want these cars to, when they do hit, you want that impact to be absorbed as much as possible, and you don't want it to be a solid hit. You want it to be something that's going to absorb it, and that's why we've titled our barrier an energy-absorbing impact barrier, because that's exactly what it does. When those cars get together, going through plastic, and our barriers are basically just they're plastic blocks. They got air inside. And they collapse and they absorb that impact, and that's exactly what you want the cars to do. You want that when they hit something, you want that something to be soft, and you want it to be something that is not going to deform whether it's the car or the barrier, you don't want it to deform. You want that impact to be absorbed, and you want to get that track cleaned up. You want to get the barriers back in place and the racing back going as soon as possible. And so that's what we offer, you know, and the barriers is no different than the asphalt. If it starts to come up, you want to be prepared, and you want to be able to get it past and get back racing, because that's what the fans want to see.
Tim?
Well, I think I passed my chemistry courses in high school okay, but I've learned quite a bit being here on the surface side of things. But I think if I had anything to add, it would be maybe there's 2 other C's to add to the list I gave you, which is common sense and courage. It's one of those things that you know, we kind of in the rush to get things done, to get, especially in a temporary setup, a temporary race course, you tend to rush through things, and again, you have to slow down, think about your planning. Have that common sense, and you know, and have the courage to speak up and do the right thing at times. It may not be the most economical things to do. You know, street courses, street racing is a very fragile economic model, as a lot of you know, and a lot of times you're trying to watch that bottom dollar, as most businesses are. And so, again, that courage to make sure you're doing the right thing to maintain the safety for everybody involved.
Bob?
Well, I've been in the racing business for probably 30 years, and it's come a long way. I really subscribe to the C's over here. Be prepared. If you're going to redo a track, do your homework. You know, make sure that you're buying what you need for your kind of an environment. And with that said, I thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure being here.
And our pavement professor, Brian.
I'd like to go back to what Tim said, is be prepared for contingencies. And we worked on the modifications to NOLA Motorsports Park for Indy coming. And the plan, mind you, was we were going to pave in August. We finished paving at 6:15 a.m. Saturday morning when the FIA inspector was coming on Monday, and changed contractors the week before. So that was a contingency.
And that was October.
And that was October, yes. Yes, that was October. So we planned to pave in August. We ended up finishing night paving because the track was in use during the day, you know, 6:15 in the morning. Contingency is just something, you know, you got to be prepared for. It can be weather, it can be problems getting these materials, it can be problems getting the material to work, it can be the contractor that had a good sales pitch and shook your hand and you really didn't know what they were doing. It happens. So just be prepared.
Let's hear it for a track construction panel. Thank you, gentlemen.